Good morning and welcome to Ad Age Remotely. I'm Adrienne Pasquarelli, Senior Reporter here at Ad Age. Today I'm joined live by Rand Harbert, Chief Marketing Officer of State Farm. Hi Rand, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey Adrienne, thank you so much for having me. It's nice to visit with you again.
It is. Before we get started, I wanted to let our viewers know that if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in our social channels and we'll do our best to get to them later in the conversation. And let us know where you're watching from. Now, we had initially planned to discuss how State Farm is navigating the coronavirus pandemic, and we will move on to that topic. But I wanted to talk about the protests and state of unrest that is sweeping the nation following the death of George Floyd last week. Several brands have come out with statements in support of racial equality, and some have released commercials promoting change. Now, Rand, I know State Farm released a statement earlier this week. Tell us about the company's response.
Yeah, so let me just start by saying, I think like most joining our audience today, State Farm is an organization, and the people that make up State Farm are outraged and saddened by the state of the union right now as it relates to this whole issue. This has been a big reminder for us as a society, and I think as an organization that we're just not as far down this path as I think many of us believe that we were, because clearly racism and hatred has not gone away. And as an organization, and if you read that statement, in effect, what we said is we're committed to taking this on and not to talking about it, but to taking actions to really try to do our part and once and for all rid our country of this, horrible, horrible issue.
We ran a story this week about how brands can respond to the protests for social justice and some of the challenges that companies face when they do make statements. The issues touch State Farm on many levels. The brand has always had a diverse group of spokespeople, for example, including the current Chris Paul campaign. Right. What have been your challenges with speaking out?
Yeah, I don't think we've had any challenges with speaking out. What we've tried to be is really smart as it relates to talking about actions instead of words. As you know, and we can craft words and do emotion as good as any brand. But we've been really careful here to say, let's let our actions speak louder than our words. And as you know, Adrienne, from our conversations in the past, we are an organization that's really made up of storefronts in communities around the country. And those 19,200 storefronts are located in 48 states in the District of Columbia, in the very neighborhoods that we're talking about, and in many cases, in the event of this current situation, are most impacted. So we don't feel like this is a new thing to us, or that we've ever tried to hide from the fact that we want to serve all American customers. So we, from our efforts that have been ongoing for years, to the type of organizations we support, to working with the Atlanta Hawks to build basketball courts in the inner city, to our current Good Neighbor Community Fund, where we're putting money out into communities all across the country through our agents' offices. We feel like this is just kind of what we do. With that said, like all organizations, I think this has forced us to look in the mirror and say, are we doing all that we can? And I think that's the big issue even for organizations that have done a good job in the past, is to look at themselves and say, are we doing all that we can? And are we double checking to make sure that what we say, what we feel, what we mean is actually what's being, transferred in reality to the street?
Right, because people are really paying attention to those words and the actions and making sure that brands are delivering on some of the promises that they're making now.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's very important to us. We spent the weekend talking about it. Our CEO actually sent a letter to the entire organization on Sunday, and the senior team spent most of yesterday talking about these issues. So Again, it's not a new issue for us. We have been very proud of our diversity and inclusion efforts for a long time. It's kind of who we are, based on the way, as I shared with you earlier, that we're made up as an organization. With that said, we are committed to doubling down and really not talking a good game, but putting instead of a lot of commercials and words into what we're doing, we're committed to putting actions into the communities we live and work in.
Are you adjusting any creative marketing that was already in the works or changing your strategy in any way to address the situation?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I pulled our team together this week. I talked to our vice president of advertising yesterday, and we're just really trying to form how we think about what we want the external response to be, and first trying to start with, what are we doing and what are we going to do action wise, and then how are we going to talk to the world about it? So I think the answer is we will absolutely make adjustments. But we have not yet. We, by design, have not rushed to the market, which some brands have, and I've seen, I think, both the good and the bad of that. But we've not rushed to the market yet with any changes. But we certainly will make changes as appropriate.
Again, if you're just joining us, I'm Adrienne Pasquarelli with Ad Age, and I'm joined by Rand Harbert, the Chief Marketing Officer of State Farm. I'd like to quickly say hi to those who are tuning in. We have Melissa from Minnesota, Ravi from India, and Raphael from Canada. Thanks, guys. Now, the social injustices we are seeing and the resulting national turmoil are also coming at a very difficult time as we now enter the 4th month of COVID-19. Rand, how has your team been handling the remote working situation?
Yeah, so it's our 83rd day today at home, and I haven't been keeping a calendar, but in preparation for this, I kind of went back and tracked, and I would say this: while it has been an intense time, I think from a learning point of view, we have learned a ton as an organization, and what we've learned is what we have the ability to do. And when we were under the amount of pressure that I think we felt in those first 7 days to get the organization up and running. And the way we did that is we moved over 100,000 people out of offices and into their home, including the agent team members and call centers. So it was a gigantic effort, and the organization pulled together and did it. What we, I think, have done better than we've ever done before is we've over communicated. If there's such a thing as too much communication, and I've never thought that. I firmly believe right now that you can't communicate enough. So the way we've really handled it is by being very thoughtful, organized, and communicating on a almost daily basis, certainly on a daily basis with the senior team, and all the way through the organization on a weekly basis, and even then coming on a weekly basis from multiple people. So, it's been a great experience. I think one of the challenges for us is we really can never pause at State Farm, because ultimately our customers depend on us when we make a promise to be there for them in the moment of their need. And as you know, or from just watching the news, we have had a very active hail and tornado season. And so our claims employees have taken all the precautions, but they really never had a day off. They never got to work from home because we were on the ground taking care of this customer. So, that in of itself for us is a really big machine to operate. So we're proud that we pulled it off, but we're more proud that the organization continues to run well, and we're taking care of our customers in their hour of need.
Now, pretty early on in the health crisis, State Farm made the decision to refund some premiums back to its auto customers. If consumers are working from home, they're driving less, and that means less accidents. The brand put out a spot featuring employees at their homes, including spokesman Jake in his trademark red shirt. I guess he keeps that in his closet. Rand, tell us about how that spot came together so quickly.
Yes, so it's a great question, Adrienne. So it was really the second spot, right? I mean, the first spot, which we put out almost immediately, was a spot that really just talked to people, and we wanted to reassure them that everything was going to be okay. As I told you, we closed on March 13th. That first spot was produced and out by March 27th. But then 2 weeks later, we made this decision that we were going to make really the third part of what we call a relief program. And when I say that we call it the Good Neighbor Relief Program, it was offering customers the opportunity to not pay if they're impacted until May 31st. And again, this was back in mid-March. The second piece of that program was a $2 billion dividend. And so once we made the determination that we were going to do the dividend, we wanted to be able to tell people, and we put that spot together and did that in about 3 days from ideation to being on air. And the first shot was spot was shot using stock photography, and the second spot was shot using personal cell phones. So we included in that employees, agents, and of course Jake was kind of our highlight. So we just felt like we had to talk to employees, kind of like the strategy that I shared with you all ago as it relates to sharing with employees. We felt like we had to talk to our customers. And so that was kind of the driver of creating those two commercials. So I can tell you in the history of our organization, where it usually takes a month to do this high level production, we probably learned a lot in that sense as well. And that, we, in those two commercials combined, I think we have less than 10 days from ideation to being on air. So that was kind of our approach. We were pleased. I think it helped us get our message out, and customers responded.
I guess that'll change how you go about moving forward. You can be so much more efficient now with making commercials.
Well, it certainly makes us ask a lot of questions going forward. So, but yeah, I mean, what you can do when you have to do, much like moving people from home, and the core of our advertising business, we learned those same lessons. And yeah, I think it probably, like this whole environment, changes some things forever.
Now, State Farm is typically a very big advertiser in live sporting events. Obviously, that's now changed. Yet the brand is still very much in the marketing mix. You sponsored Jimmy Fallon's home show, a reunion special of the sitcom Parks and Rec, and of course, State Farm was a presenting sponsor of The Last Dance, the ESPN documentary on Michael Jordan. How has the lack of live sports changed your strategy?
Well, it's changed everything. I mean, you already knew the answer to that question. I mean, it just changed. It changed how we think. It changes how we plan. But we like live sports, and I think we're not the only one in this camp. But we actually love live sports because it gives us a chance to talk to consumers in a capacity where they're wanting to watch things in the live form, and we just think we've done better than that. And that's really been our sports strategy all along. But the reality is, even before we closed the building on the 13th, all the leagues, the Final Four, everything had been shut down. And at the same time, we were watching the same thing that you were seeing, which is huge spikes in everything digital, all things streaming. And we just quickly had to look for opportunities to be as relevant in that space. And I think the key word there is probably look for opportunities. So, you talk about things like The Last Dance, and, we were really lucky early on to have committed to The Last Dance. And the reason we committed to The Last Dance initially, months before we knew all this was going to happen, was obviously we liked the idea of the content, but we thought it tied so nicely into our basketball strategy. We also liked the thing that it was going to be minimal sponsorship. So they up front had decided they were going to have 3 key sponsors. And so we liked all those things. Then once the COVID crisis happened and the pandemic was full scale and there were no live sports, how much people were craving that. So it kind of became the accidental best decision we've ever made at State Farm, in the sense that the viewership was incredible. We got to do some unique things on there. We got to tell the stories that I told a while ago as it relates to dividend and giving back. That may be more important than all that. We got to do some stuff creatively that we think served the brand well, like the deep fake Kenny Mayne spot and the deep fake that we even did with a different set of ESPN reporters on the last spot. So it just let us do some exploring and some things that we otherwise haven't done. And then as it relates to the other things you talked about, like Fallon and some of those opportunities, Disney sing along, things that we would probably have never thought about before. We just felt like anything in the live form that could lift people's spirits was a good place to put our brand in front of. So my team and really the unsung heroes are ZOMD and our media buying organization, in the sense that they looked and scoured and searched for these opportunities that were very different from the media plan that we originally, had in mind when we were starting this year so optimistically.
Now, with The Last Dance, your integration was quite innovative, as you mentioned. We have that commercial that you mentioned with Mr. Maine. We can show that now.
Let's get right to it. The Chicago Bulls have won their second three-peat. This is the kind of stuff that ESPN will eventually make a documentary about. They'll call it something like The Last Dance and make it a 10-part series and release it in the year 2020. It's going to be lit. You don't even know what that means yet. While I'm making predictions, jeans will get extra tight. There'll be a thing called a butt fumble, and this clip will be used to promote the documentary in a State Farm commercial. It's just a hunch.
That certainly was lit. I'd love to hear what he can forecast for us today. Tell us what, how you had to pivot. I think you had a different plan originally for the documentary specifically.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I think most people have heard by now, the documentary was going to be a fall series. It wasn't intended for this. And the great people at Disney and ESPN made the good decision, or we felt it was a great decision to really move all that forward, which then really put a lot of pressure on them as it relates to, getting that thing done, edited, and ready to go on air. But it served us so well. And I, originally we would have done original content on that. But we worked with the ESPN Creative Works team, and they, we've worked with them before, and they're phenomenal, but they just did a great job and kind of brought this in. And again, that was in the first week, episode 1 and 2 with the Kenny Mayne spot. And then we came back and did a similar spot in week 6, the last week, or week 5 rather, with Linda Cohn and Keith Oberman, same kind of thing, and kind of got an equal reaction to that as well. So we didn't go into it thinking that we would go that route, but it really turned out well for the brand.
So it's safe to say you were pleased with the results.
Super pleased. Yeah, I mean I tease the people that I work with, is like, did you have any idea that you were going to do, almost NFC, AFC championship week type of numbers 5 weeks in a row, because it's just kind of the only game in town. And gosh, I wish we could have told you we were smart enough and planned for that. But, sometimes you get lucky. I think on this one, we got lucky, and we were just so pleased with that partnership.
What do you think about the proposal to restart the NBA season at Disney World? Will State Farm still have a marketing presence there if they do?
Yeah. Well, we're all about the live sports, and particularly all about anything that has to do with the NBA, just because of our, support. So we've been in contact with the NBA all along. They've done a great job of keeping their key partners involved. And while nothing's set in stone yet, I can't imagine if it does start, and we're fans of it starting. If it does start, we'll be a part of that program.
Once again, I'm Adrienne Pasquarelli with Ad Age, and I'm joined by Rand Harbert, CMO of State Farm. We actually have a question from the audience. Susan on LinkedIn asks, what consumer or customer behaviors do you feel are permanently changed based on your observations, what you've been seeing?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and one that we're talking about almost on a daily basis. I'll start with that question from the point of view of our business. One is, our core business is the auto insurance business, and we don't believe the office and people working together is dead, as some have predicted. We believe that will come back. But the question is will it come back to the extent it's ever been? So I think if you're in the business that we're in, and you think about whatever percentage, 10%, 30%, whatever percentage of people that drive every day to work, that going forward don't drive to work, that changes our world forever. Rush hour, as we know it, which of course is the highest propensity of traffic accidents, which is what we're in the business of doing, changes forever. So I think from that sense, the whole work from home initiative and wherever that lands and how it lands will have great impact, not only on us as an organization who insures cars, but I think on society as a whole, as it just kind of reshapes the way we think about, how society operates and what we all do, or what our goal is, which was to have a job and go to work and then come home and separate those lives. And I think as we've all grown accustomed to in the last 90 days, that's just not our reality. So I think that is a really big thing. I think the other thing, and this is more from a personal standpoint, is that people have figured out through this pause what's important and what's not in many cases. And I say that from a work front, but also a personal front. And I think this is one of those things, and I've told my own adult children, like, this is your Great Depression, and this is going to change you forever, and you'll talk about it the rest of your life. And I just think it really changes mindsets. And as we've talked to consumers, and we've done some really interesting in-home consumer focus groups. And, of course, depending on what part of the country you're in, depends on how the response is. So the people in apartments in New York, with all of the death that they've witnessed and really the severity of the crisis, feel totally different than people in the Midwest or even on the West Coast. But wherever you are, I think this has changed you. And, that's coming from me, but I have 3 children in their 20s, all in the work world. And I can tell you, they would all tell you right now, this has made them change the way they think about how people are going to work going forward.
Now, we're almost out of time, but I had one last question. I know State Farm has cut its rates, and I was wondering if you're seeing that as a general industry trend, and if you think that might lead to an overall price war with other brands.
Yeah. So, well, I hope it doesn't lead to a price war, but the reality is this. I shared with you earlier what we call the Good Neighbor Relief Program, which really made it 3 things: giving back, giving people the opportunity to have some flex in payment, and that program went through May 31st. Second was this $2 billion dividend. But we recently announced that we were cutting rates in all jurisdictions. So all states in Washington, D.C. by an overall average of 11%, which is pretty significant. And when you think about how significant, that total is about $2.2 billion. You put that with the dividend, that's $4.2 billion of value that we're giving back to our customers. As it relates to a rate war, I don't know, because I think everyone does their rates, based on their own program that they're running. For us, we look back at experience. It's the past experience, and the bottom line is people are driving less, significantly less. Now they're driving more right now than they did 2 weeks ago. But the question will be is how long and how far will this go? And so, we didn't take a flyer with that last rate decrease. We looked at our experience, and we believe we made the right decision for our organization as it relates to getting that money back in the hands of customers right now, because we charge them for what they use, and in effect, that's kind of where we landed. So we'll watch this closely. If trends go back, obviously rates are going to fluctuate and change to the other way. But right now, we're really confident with the decision we made, and we think it was, most importantly, we think it's right for customers.
And no matter what happens, it'll make marketing all the more important.
Marketing right now, and I think this is true for all brands, and it's a little bit back to your very first question. I think customers right now are more care about the core of what the brands stand for than probably they ever have before. And we like that position. We like where we stand in that. So we're looking forward to telling our story and doing it in the most powerful way possible.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you, Rand, so much for joining us. And also, thank you to our digital team at AdAge, Alfred Mascaroni, Anna Sakula, Max Sternlick, and Elise Liffring. Thank you guys for helping out, and thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you.